I'm with Andre van Rensburg from Vergelegen. Now, is that pronunciation correct, Vergelegen?
That's really good.
That's really good. It's probably because I've got a bit of hay fever at the moment. It's coming out well. But it is one of those difficult things. People often don't know how to pronounce your wine. And I suppose it often is just known as Vergelegen or whatever. But Vergelegen wines. Tell me, whereabouts in South Africa are you based?
We're in Somerset West, about 40 kilometers from Cape Town. Directly on the coast, about 6 kilometers from the ocean. In the region that is called Stellenbosch.
Yes. I had a little look at the website earlier. It looks very attractive, you know, the sea gently lapping in the background. Obviously quite a lot of coastal influence on these wines. They're in a cool climate, and that is obviously a big part in the winemaking, or the stars of the wine, is it? The coastal influence.
Yes, it's very important. The climate, the microclimate, and obviously the soil being influenced also by the ocean because of marine deposits that were laid down millions of years ago.
Yes.
So,
and when was the vineyard first planted? I mean, it's an old vineyard, isn't it?
Well, the farm was founded in 1700,
right.
And we read in travel journals from the time that by 1708 Van der Stel had already planted something like 400,000 vines.
Now, Van der Stel, he was the governor, wasn't he, of South Africa? If I remember right.
Dutch governor at the Cape.
That's right.
Succeeded his father, who was a previous governor and was the founder of Groot Constantia.
Right, okay. And you have a range here of 4 or 5 different varieties? You have more on the farm, don't you? About 8 varieties on the farm?
Yeah, mostly border varieties.
Yes.
The 2 big ones are Sauvignon and Semillon for the whites. A little bit of Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Red, the big one is obviously Cabernet, Merlot, Cab Franc, a little bit of Petit Verdot, Malbec, and a tiny bit of Shiraz.
Which is fairly new. I gather ever since you've arrived, you've been making some good Shiraz, isn't that right?
Well, we tried to.
Or perhaps we should judge that.
Yeah, you should judge.
Okay, well let's taste through the range and take them one by one. Starting with the Sauvignon. Have you got a glass there? And you can just tell us a little bit about that. So we're on a 2009 Sauvignon, and I imagine it's fairly sort of typical of a certain style each year. I mean, people may be watching this in some years to come, so we won't necessarily dwell on this particular vintage, but the style of wine you're trying to make.
Yeah, we try to keep it extremely consistent because that's important. That's a premium wine, an entry kind of Sauvignon. We produce 2 Sauvignons.
Right.
One that's a white label and that contains a minimum of 60% own grapes, rest sourced outside from cool areas. And then the reserve label, which is a black label, which is one vineyard
here. Yes.
One vineyard from the farm.
Right. Okay.
So 209, really good vintage. It's around 97%, 97% Sauvignon, rest Semillon. We never produce the premium Sauvignon as 100% wine. For simple reasons, we want to add more body and flavour to it. Sauvignon on its own can be fairly one-dimensional, lean.
So this just adds a bit more complexity
to
it,
and increases the longevity of the wine.
Right, okay. I mean, how long, I mean, most people are used to drinking Sauvignon in the first year or so. I mean, how long do your Sauvignons last, actually?
Well, we've had, we tend to drink them from year 2 to 3. That's when they kind of settle. And they will keep, depending on vintage, for as long as 7 years.
Yeah. And the screw cap helps that?
So, well, they did the same under cork. So
yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting. I've tasted some New Zealand Sauvignons from the same vintage under both cork and screw cap, and they tasted very different 3 years down the line. The one with the screw cap was an awful lot fresher than the one with the cork, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
But you still do some of the cork, do you?
Only on the reserve wines.
Only on the reserves, yeah.
The premium wines are all screw cap now.
Yeah, except of course the reds, they're all corked. Yeah. Okay, so again, tell me a little bit about the style here.
Really fresh, typical Sauvignon, and it's Sauvignon from that site specific. It's cool climate Sauvignon. We want a lot of gooseberry, touch of green pepper, guava, green or ripe fig, depending on vintage, passion fruit always, and on the palate you will find a citrus fruit. It could be lemons, but mostly it's grapefruit, and really elegant, lots of minerality, good acidity, long aftertaste.
Yeah, it's certainly got good acidity. I can see that sort of grapefruit, almost grapefruit segments here you can smell in there. But it is quite a complex wine. Lovely food wine.
It is really good with
Yeah.
seafood,
Yeah.
especially oysters,
Yeah.
simply grilled fish, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be seeing that this evening on this, during this dinner. I imagine we're tasting this one during this evening. I'm sure we are. Theo, are we tasting this one this evening in the dinner?
Yeah, that's the aperitif wine.
That's aperitif wine. Lovely. Okay, well, let's move on then to a Chardonnay. Take us through the range. So again, this is a 2009 Chardonnay. So the 2010, that's presumably in barrel now, is it?
It's in barrel.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about the 2009.
Okay, 209, premium Chardonnay, which means, as with a Sauvignon, minimum of 60% of a property,
Yeah.
rest sourced from long-term contracted
Yeah.
growth outside.
Yeah.
We tried to make it in a cool climate style. We've moved away from the wine being 100% barrel fermented and matured for up to a year, because the wine took too long to come.
Yeah, yeah.
At least 2 to 3 years before it's really drinkable. And I think it's lovely.
I think also it's a style that people are looking to move away from throughout the world, aren't they? I think the Australians have slightly bastardised Chardonnay.
And we're now running at 40% fermented, matured in barrel for about 10 months.
Yes.
60% in stainless steel for freshness.
Yeah.
In tank on the lees, and we kind of simulate the barrel conditions in the tank. We ferment it at a slightly higher temperature, around 18 to 20, which is the temperature that you will have during barrel fermentations. And we stir up the lees at least once a week for the first 100 days, and then twice a month by simply using a mixer. The components in barrel, we do exactly the same. After 100 days in barrel, we close the barrels and we simply roll them from one side of the cellar and back to exclude oxygen uptake. After 10 months, we bottle the different components, or blend them, bottle them, and it's immediately onto the market.
It's a beautiful wine, this, actually, because it's got quite a lot of complexity, yet, as you say, it's very fresh and very clean.
Yeah.
And I think it's a style that people are liking. It's a style that you would like, Theo. I think this. In fact, I believe it's one of the ones that you take home and drink yourself, isn't it?
That is true.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a bit from Chablis with a full-blown white burgundy blended in. So you have a lovely freshness, a good acidity, the minerality.
Yeah, certainly the minerality comes through very strongly.
And then a little bit of a...
But I like the use of oak, because it is a very gentle use of oak, and I think that enhances the wine.
Understatement.
As opposed to sort of overpowering the fruit, which so often happens with people who make Chardonnay, I think. So that's a lovely wine. And again, we'll be trying that this evening with food. Now we're going to go on now to the flagship white, which is your top white, am I right?
Yes, that's correct. And that's 100% of a property.
Yeah.
It's obviously very much influenced by Bordeaux white, especially those from the Graf area. So it's Semillon and Sauvignon. In this particular case, 75% Semillon and 25 Sauvignon. Individually vinified and matured. The Semillon is always done in 100% new French oak, 225 litre barriques. And the Sauvignon is matured in 500 litre barrels, of which it's never more than 1/3 will be new.
Right, and this is the 2007
That's a
vintage,
2007.
yeah, so you prefer to keep it a couple of years before you release
You
it?
have to.
I imagine,
You
yeah.
have to.
And I mean, you immediately get a much stronger nose, don't you? It's a darker, richer colour, stronger
All
nose.
typical of the barrel, aging a year in bottle. It's a year in barrel, then blended, or firstly a barrel selection, then blended, a year in bottle, and then released. So it should be 2 to 3 years old when it comes onto the market, and you drink it over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Do you often go back over your wines? I mean, you obviously keep some of your wines. What do they call it?
Museum
Library
stock.
stock.
Library stock.
Museum stock.
Museum stock, library stock. I couldn't think of the word for it. You obviously keep that. How often do you go back and taste wines from older vintages?
I would say at least once a year.
Yeah.
We do have a vertical tasting of these wines at least say every second year, but the problem is you tend to run out of stock.
Yes.
You never keep back enough.
No.
And there's always someone with a special request.
Yeah.
I need a case of
So you have to-
older wine.
Yeah.
And before you really recognize or realize it, you're out of the vintage.
Yeah.
So we
We've got to
reaching
put aside a bit more, of course,
Yeah.
haven't you? But
we're starting to reach that stage where it's patchy with most vintages.
yeah.
We either have just a case or sometimes just a few bottles,
Really,
and it's a
yeah.
problem.
Yes. So a wine like this, for example, after 10 years,
Well, we've had the 2001, which was the first vintage fairly recently, and that's still keeping well.
yeah,
Everything in wine is about how you like it. Some people like these wines more mature, others like to drink them fresh.
yeah,
We believe they should be at least 3-4 years old when you touch them.
Well, it'll be interesting looking at the reds, which of course are very much the Bordeaux, apart from the Shiraz, Bordeaux grape varieties. And you're right what you say. I mean, there are undoubtedly, with claret, there are people, I like them younger, or fruit, there are others who love them old and dusty. And they see that as being more complex. To me, it's not, but I like the fruit. But it'll be interesting to see how we get on with those. So thank you very much. That's a lovely, lovely wine. So we're going on to reds now, and again, this is the premium, and then you've got 3 of the next range, which you call the reserve range, and then the flagship. Yes, yeah. People would ask why premium is the bottom end. You think premium would be higher up the scale, but I suppose you've got to start somewhere. So the premium red, Cabernet Merlot, previously known as Mill Race, and many viewers will be probably thinking about that. Mill Race name's been dropped for what reason?
Well, it's almost, it got confusing. This is a Vergelegen wine. Mulrace almost became a brand on its own,
Yeah.
which we didn't want.
Yeah.
It was named after the old historic mill on the property that dates
Right.
back to 1700, and it's so much easier. I think it's
You could have made
confusing.
them all Mill Race at that level.
You could probably, but we didn't.
But you
want
didn't,
it. It's
no,
Vergelegen, and it's. I think it's clearer, it's cleaner, and you
Yeah.
know where you stand.
Yeah. So
White labels, entry level, and
yeah, no, it's very, very clear. I mean, we all know what we're drinking here. So classic Bordeaux blend. Anything else in there? Because you talked about having a bit of Petit Verdot and Cab Franc on the
yes,
estate.
there's always around a minimum of 85 to 90% will be Cabernet Merlot.
Yeah.
And then depending on vintage, there's quite a decent bit of Cabernet Franc in it. Some years it will be either Malbec or Petit Verdot.
Yeah.
And something that we didn't, well, I never tell people that, but I think it's in
Do
line.
you put it on the
There's
back? You don't put it on the back label or not?
No, just on the front cabinet. We don't give a percentages. There's always a bit 1 to 2% of Shiraz, like the Bordeaux people
Okay.
were doing in the old days.
Yeah, yeah.
And some people might imagine that they pick it up. I think it just gives nice roundness and structure to the wine. It's really lovely ripe fruit. A lot of them black currant, black cherries. And if you taste the wine, you will see that the tannins are so soft. And that's a big difference between us and, say, Bordeaux. Bordeaux tannins tend to be more grainy. This is velvet.
Yeah, yeah. And again, very evident on the palate. And the vintage on this one is 2007. You were saying with your reds, you like to leave them a few years
You
anyway.
need time. We've seen it often that the wines need time, anything between 3 and 5 years before you really start having a serious go at them.
Yeah.
And most of them, including the Mulrace, will keep for 10 plus years.
We're talking about a price bracket here, I think of about sort of 10 quid, 9 pounds a bottle. And there's no doubt that knocks spots off the average Bordeaux you can pick up at that price.
Well, we're very proud of this wine. We want that consistency, that quality. For instance, the 2005 was a 90 points in the US,
Okay.
won a gold in Switzerland. The 206 was a top 10 in South African Bordeaux
Yeah.
tasting
Yeah.
as an entry-level wine from us.
So when you're talking about a 90, are you talking about Robert Parker?
Wine enthusiast. Parker is not tasting South
So
African.
he's not doing South African wines, no. Why is that? Just hasn't got around to it yet.
Probably we don't know.
Has an aversion to South Africa, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's lovely, it's soft, there's good complexity in the wine, it's a stunning food wine. Consumers will never be embarrassed if they serve it to guests. Decanted, serve it in really big glasses.
I mean, what jumps out is the fruit out of that wine, which you often don't get in Bordeaux of equivalent price levels. And South Africa is doing very well in the market at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you're finding that, but I mean, over here in this country, with the exchange rates being generally favourable, the winemaking, I think, has improved hugely. And I mean, we're expanding our South African range all the time. Australia is falling away, and I think a lot more interest in South African wines.
Well, for the first time in 350 years, we've been selling more wines here than the French. So,
is that right?
Yeah, apparently that's what happened earlier this year. So
well, the exchange rate hasn't helped the French.
Yeah, so it's great for us. It's a kind of milestone.
Yeah. But it's a marvellous opportunity to break into this market. I imagine it's still a pretty important market for you.
It is because of family ties, almost blood ties. The Cape being a colony of the British Empire at one stage. A lot of Britons have family in South Africa.
Yeah.
A lot of them have visited Vergelegen.
Yes,
they
right.
know the property, and it's property, and it's a kind of very intimate and personal.
Well, I think it also, I mean, the great thing about going to Cape Town from here is, first of all, I mean, you know, you've got no problem with the time, and secondly, the wine region is only within an hour of Cape Town, so everybody who goes to Cape Town basically visits, you know, Paarl or.
And the nice thing is you drive on the same side of the road.
Yes, that helps. Speak the same language, just.
And love cricket and rugby.
Yeah, love cricket. Yes, I was out for the British Lions series, which is tremendous. Anyway, we digress. We're going on to the Shiraz now. 2006. Yeah, in line with what you're saying about leaving the wine. So this is very much your baby. Do you make a top Shiraz?
No, it's only one.
One Shiraz.
Only one. With these wines, because they reserve and in the flagship on the end, it's all just one.
Yeah. So
it's my best shot.
Okay.
In the vintage.
Yeah. Right. All grown from grapes on the farm.
All
as is this with this range. Yeah. Okay. Tell me about this one then.
Okay. One vineyard here. We produce about 500 cases.
Okay. So fairly small.
Yeah, it's very small. Very careful selection. And then matured in barrel for 15 months. Not a lot of new wood in it. About 30%, followed by a year to 2 years in bottle. Before it's released, you can drink it over the next 10 plus years.
Very much your own style. You're not trying to copy Rhone or Australia in any way.
It's very much farm influence, so it's driven by our soil, our terroir, our climate.
Yeah.
And there's obviously old world influence. It's not that kind of jump out of the glass fruit and wood kind of combination. It's rather more elegant. You get the raspberry and the licorice, a little bit of coffee and chocolate flavors, and then the spice. Very elegant, very subtle, and very velvety tannins.
Yes, I mean, I think you'd struggle in some cases. I'm struggling anyway because of my hay fever to smell anything at the moment. But you know, people perhaps wouldn't put it down as an obvious Shiraz in many cases. But again, the thing that's shining through is the fruit, which is there in a big way, isn't it?
Very elegant, very elegant. That's the one thing about all the wines. You will see that none of them is kind of out of its place, out of the lineup. It fits nicely.
I imagine this is a wine you sell out of pretty easily each year.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, firstly, there's not a lot of it, and it's kind of getting a loyal following.
Yeah. Presumably you sell from cellar door as well, do you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Do you have restaurants and whatever as well?
Well, throughout the year, one restaurant, the Lady Phillips, and then during season we've got the white cloth or white linen picnic under the camphor trees or in the camphor forest, and then the rose terrace.
Yes, that's lovely. That's getting one of the things about South Africa, isn't it? You know, visiting the vineyards, you can spend a whole day there, you know, eating, drinking, and just enjoying the beauty of it all. It certainly looks gorgeous.
Well, at Vergelegen you actually need a bit more than a day.
A bit more than a day.
A bit more than a day.
I look forward to it. So, straight Merlot.
Not really.
Little, okay, it says that on the bottle.
Always a bit,
Yeah.
always a bit kinky, you know, there's always a bit something else.
Yeah.
It's around 85% Merlot, and then 8% Cab Franc, and the rest Cab Sauvignon. Normally matured for around 20 months in French oak only, no American oak. 60% new, followed by 2 years in bottle before it's released.
Yeah.
It's very much a Bordeaux style wine. It's not one of these jump out of glass fruity.
You see, I'm surprised that you don't put on the back label something about the other great varieties you put in, because there are a lot of people who love reading back labels and love to learn a little bit more about the wine, and you know, they will see they'll see it as something perhaps slightly more complex if you're talking about putting in a little bit of Malbec or Petit Verdot or Cab Franc. I'm surprised you don't mention it.
Yeah, I think it's something we want to keep it relatively simple. They know that they're drinking, by EU legislation, a minimum of 85%.
85%, yeah.
And it will mean that I'll have to change every vintage back label, which you know, it's obviously time and cost.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
But there's a lovely cherry flavour here, black fruit, spiciness.
It's a lot of spice on this one.
Bit of kind of chocolate, milk chocolate flavour to it. Very soft tannins.
Is it more popular to buy than the Cabernet? I mean, do you find the punters who come to the cellar door prefer to buy the Merlot?
We've always experienced kind of opposite to what's happening in the UK. In Europe, we sell kind of, they see what the Merlot is. They understand it's not just a single varietal bubblegum wine, it's complex, it's a Bordeaux style wine. So they tend to like it a lot here, whereas locally it's always been Cabernet. And we're starting to see the same thing happening actually now here. There's a huge Cabernet following because they're starting to get used to the wine. You need to drink it when it's 4 or 5 years old, and it's absolutely great value for money, both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see Cabernet Sauvignons as being a little bit austere and a little bit sort of too rich, and they tend to sort of stay away from it. They want something a bit more user-friendly. That's the perception, I think, probably here. And a lot of people go for Merlot, there's no doubt about that, because traditionally it's quite soft and quite plummy, and tannins are easy, gentle, and you know, it's an easier wine to drink for many people, I think.
It is.
But perhaps a starting point. So let's move to the Cabernet, which almost certainly has got lots of other bits and pieces in it as well.
Cabernet is the most important varietal on the property. A lot of Cabernet has been planted there for simple reasons. The soils are decomposed granites. I mean, if you've been to Vergelegen, we're surrounded by mountains on both the northern, eastern and western side, and only open to the ocean on the south and westerly side. Because of the granite, you see typicity in the grapes. In other words, a Cabernet tastes like Cabernet should taste, and they've got the ability to keep. Low yields because of the relatively poor soils, which is really good for Cabernet, and 91% Cabernet with 4.5 each of Merlot and Cabernet Franc, and 2 years in barrel, and then.
I mean, that's to all intents and purposes, that's a very good claret, isn't it?
Yeah.
It certainly is of all the wines here, that to me, from what I can smell at the moment, smells and tastes more like classic claret, which many people love.
It is classic.
The problem that we have, of course, is moving on those traditional claret lovers to experiment with something from another country.
Obviously, huge advantage. I mean, you've immediately picked up that it's classical claret, but there's still two big differences. I think the fruit intensity is more obvious than in Bordeaux wines, and the tannins. The tannins are, again, not grainy. Like in Bordeaux is velvet. It's very soft, and absolutely stunning with your Sunday roast.
Yes, absolutely. It would be very interesting to do a tasting side by side between that and a good claret, especially to our traditional customers, and just tell them which one they prefer. You know, rather than them just gravitating back to the French all the time. But no, very nice wine. Now your final wine is the flagship red, which I imagine is a bit of a mixture of everything.
Yeah, it's almost, well, we can call it a single vineyard wine. It's planted 75% Cabernet, 20 Merlot and 5% Cabernet Franc. We've now, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've also added some Petit Verdot and Malbec.
Okay, so you've got every
We've
Bordeaux.
got everything, but it's not yet in. It will only be in probably 3 to 4 years from now.
Okay.
Obviously, vintage variation cause that perfect match.
This is, what vintage is this?
This is 2003.
3. Right, okay, so we're talking
And
7, 8 years old.
Yes, and it's 76 Cabernet, 18 Merlot, and 6 or 8%, 6% Cab Franc. Matured for 2 years, 100% new French oak,
Okay.
followed by 3 years in bottle. And
Which oak does it go in? Which
we've
type
got,
of it?
over the years,
Yeah,
no, it's only tight grain, normally Centaur France or Allier Forest.
Okay.
We don't want the oak to detract from the fruit quality.
Do you experiment with different barrels?
Yes, we
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
We've done that.
And you've come to a conclusion?
After many years,
Yes.
we're down to about 4 different suppliers
Right,
now,
right.
and that's what goes in.
Mm. There's colossal length on that wine. Goes on and on, doesn't it? Mm.
And a lot of sweet, ripe fruit, a lot of spice. Again, that really soft tannins, and then the minerality and fine acidity.
Mm. Great. Well, that's a fascinating and a fairly quick run through the wines. As I said, I've been struggling to smell today, but thank you for describing them. And I think we're going to be having a dinner this evening, and it'll be fascinating to see how these taste with food, because there's no doubt that some of them are probably designed to go with food, rather than be drunk on their own.
They're food wines.
Mm. Well, thank you very much indeed.
That's a big
Your
pleasure.
good health. Enjoy your time in wet England.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.